What was wanting to complete the universal happiness? Elizabeth's spirits rose to unwanted gaiety in the society of her young relations, and her cousin Edwin in particular found her the most delightful companion in the world, for she was as fearless on horseback as himself, and was unwearied in amusing him by accounts of the foreign countries she had seen and adventures, ridiculous or fearful, that she had encountered. In Mrs. Raby she found a beloved friend for serious hours, and Falkner's recovered health and spirits were a source of exhaustless congratulation. Yet where was Gerard Neville, where the looks of love and rapturous sense of sympathy, before which all the other joys of life fade into dimness? Love causes us to get more rid of our haunting identity and to give ourselves more entirely away than any other emotion. It is the most complete, the most without veil or shadow to mar its beauty. Every other human passion occupies but a distinct portion of our being. This assimilates with all and turns the whole into bliss or misery. Elizabeth did not fear that Gerard would forget her. He had remembered through the dark hours gone by, and now his shadow walked with her beneath the avenues of Belleforest, and the recollection of his love impregnated the balmy airs of spring with a sweetness unfelt before. Elizabeth had now leisure to love, and many an hour she spent in solitary yet blissful dreams, almost wondering that such happiness was to be found on earth. What a change, what a contrast between the death-girt prison of Carlisle and the love-adorned glades of her ancestral park. Not long ago the sky appeared to bend over one universe of tears and woe, and now, in the midst, a piece of heaven had dropped down upon earth, and she had entered the enchanted ground. Yet as weeks sped on, some thoughts troubled her repose. Gerard neither came nor wrote. At length she got a letter from Lady Cecil, congratulating her on Falkner's acquittal and the kindness of her aunt. Her letter was amiable, yet it was constrained, and Elizabeth, reading it again and again, and pondering on every expression, became aware that her friends felt less satisfaction than she did in the turn of fortune that placed her and Falkner together under her paternal roof. She had believed that, as Elizabeth Raby, Neville would at once claim her, but she was forced to recollect that Falkner was still at her side, and what intercourse could there be between him and his mother's destroyer? Thus anxiety and sadness penetrated poor Elizabeth's newfound paradise. She strove to appear the same, but she stole away when she could to meditate alone on her strange lot. It doubled her regret to think that Neville also was unhappy. She figured the struggles he underwent. She almost thought that if he were happy she could bear all. She remembered him as she last saw him, agitated and wretched. She alone, she felt sure, could calm, she alone minister happiness, and were they never more to meet? Falkner, who watched Elizabeth with all the jealousy of excessive affection, soon perceived the change. At first her gaiety had been spontaneous, her step free, her voice and laugh the very echo of joy. Now the forced smile, the frequent abstraction, the eagerness with which she watched for opportunities to steal into solitude, while her attentions to him became even more sedulous and tender, as if she wished to prove how ready she was to make every sacrifice for his sake. All these appearances he saw, and his heart ached to think how the effects of his errors still spread poison over his own life, and that of one so dear. He felt sure that Mrs. Raby shared his uneasiness. She and her niece were much less together than before. Elizabeth could not speak of the thoughts that occupied her, and she could not feign with her dear, wise friend, whose eyes read her soul, and whose counsels or consolations she alike feared. Falkner saw Mrs. Raby's regards fix anxiously on her young relative. He penetrated her thoughts, and again he was forced to abhor himself as the destroyer of the happiness of all who came within his sphere. It was evident that some communication must take place between some one of the individuals thus misplaced and wretched. Elizabeth alone was resigned, and therefore silent. Falkner longed to act rather than to speak, to depart, to disappear forever. He also, therefore, brooded mutely over the state of things. Mrs. Raby, seeing the wretchedness that was creeping over the hearts of those whose happiness she most desired, was the first to enter on the subject. One day, being alone with Falkner, she began, "The more I see and admire my dearest niece," she said, "the greater I feel our obligation to be to you, Mr. Falkner, for having made her what she is. Her natural disposition is full of excellence, but it is the care and the education you bestowed which give her character so high a tone. Had she come to us in her childhood, it is more than probable she would have been placed in a convent, and what nature, however perfect, but would be injured by the system that reigns in those places? To you we owe our fairest flower, and if gratitude could repay you, you would be repaid by mine. To prove it, and to serve you, must always be the most pleasing duty of my life. I should be much happier, said Falkner, if I could regard my interference as you do. I fear I have injured irreparably my beloved girl, and that through me she is suffering pangs which she is too good to acknowledge, but which in the end may destroy her. Had I restored her to you, had she been brought up here, she and Gerard Neville would not now be separated. But they might never have met, replied Mrs. Raby. It is indeed vain thus to regard the past. Not only is it unalterable, but each link of the chain, producing the one that followed, seems, in our instance, to have been formed and riveted by a superior power for peculiar purposes. The whole order of events is inscrutable. One little change, and none of us would be as we are now. Except as a lesson or a warning, we ought not to contemplate the past, but the future certainly demands our attention. It is impossible to see Gerard Neville and not to feel an intense interest in him. He is worthy of our Elizabeth, and he is ardently attached to her, and has, besides, made a deep impression on her young heart, which I would not have erased or lessened, for I am sure that her happiness, as far as mortals can be happy, will be ensured by their marriage. I stand in the way of this union, of that I am well aware, said Falkner, but be assured I will not continue to be an obstacle to the welfare of my angel girl. It is for this that I would consult you. How are contradictions to be reconciled, or rather, how can we contrive my absence so as to remove every impediment, and yet not to awaken Elizabeth's suspicions? I dislike contrivances, replied Mrs. Raby, and I hate all mystery. Suffer me, therefore, to speak frankly to you. I have often conversed with Elizabeth. She is firm not to marry, so as to be wholly divided from you. She reasons calmly, but she never wavers. She will not, she says, commence new duties by, in the first place, betraying her old ones. She should be forever miserable if she did, and therefore those who love her must not ask it. Sir Gerard entertains similar sentiments with regard to himself, though less resolute, and, I believe, less just than hers. I received a letter from him this morning. I was pondering whether to show it to you or to my niece. It seems to me best that you should read it, if it will not annoy you. Give it me, said Falkner, and permit me also to answer it. It is not in my nature to dally with evils. I shall meet those that now present themselves, and bring the best remedy I can, at whatever cost. Neville's letter was that of a man whose wishes were at war with his principles, and yet who was not convinced of the justice of the application of those principles. It began by deeply regretting the estrangement of Elizabeth from his family, by asking Mrs. Raby if she thought that she could not be induced to pay another visit to Lady Cecil. He said that lady was eager to see her, and only delayed asking her till she ascertained whether her friendship, which was warm and lively as ever, would prove as acceptable as formerly. I will at once be frank with you, the letter continued, for your excellent understanding may direct us and will suggest excuses for our doubts. You may easily divine the cause of our perplexities, though you can scarcely comprehend the extremely painful nature of mine. Permit me to treat you as a friend, be the judge of my cause. I have faith in the purity and uprightness of a woman's heart when she is endowed with gifts such as you possess. I had once thought to refer myself to Miss Raby herself, but I dread the generous devotedness of her disposition. Will you, who love her, take therefore the task of decision on yourself? Neville went on to express, in few but forcible words, his attachment to Elizabeth, his conviction that it could never change, and his persuasion that she returned it. It is not therefore my cause merely that I plead, he said, but hers also. Do not call me presumptuous for thus expressing myself. A mutual attachment alone can justify extraordinary conduct, but where it is mutual, every minor consideration ought to give way before it. The happiness of both our lives depends upon our not trifling with feelings which I am sure can never change. They may be the source of perpetual felicity. If not, they must be pregnant with misery to the end of our lives. But why this sort of explanation, when the meaning that I desire to convey is, that as may I not say, we love each other, no earthly power shall deprive me of her, sooner or later she must, she shall be mine, and meanwhile this continued separation is painful beyond my fortitude to bear. Can I take my mother's destroyer by the hand and live with him on terms of intimacy and friendship? Such is the price I must pay for Elizabeth. May I so far forget the world's censure, and I may say the instigations of nature, as unreservedly to forgive. I will confess to you, dear Mrs. Raby, that when I saw Falkner in the most degrading situation in which a man can be placed, manacled, and as a felon, his dignity of mien, his majestic superiority to all the race of common mortals around, the grandeur of his calm yet piercing eye, and the sensibility of his voice, won my admiration. With such is peopled that heaven, where the noble penitent is more welcome than the dull follower of narrow code of morals, who never erred because he never felt. I pardon him then from my heart in my mother's name. These sentiments, the entire forgiveness of the injury done me, and the sense of his merits still continue. But may I act on them? Would not you despise me if I did? Say but that you would, and my sentence is pronounced. I lose Elizabeth, I quit England for ever. It matters little where I go. Yet before you decide, consider that this man possesses virtues of the highest order. He honored as much as he loved my mother, and if his act was criminal, dearly has he paid the result. I persuade myself that there is more real sympathy between me and my mother's childhood's friend, who loved her so long and truly, whose very crime was a mad excess of love, than one who knew nothing of her, to whom her name conjures up no memories, no regret. I feel that I could lament with Falkner the miserable catastrophe, and yet not curse him for bringing it about. Nay, as with such a man there can be no half-sentiments, I feel that if we are thrown together, his noble qualities will win ardent sentiments of friendship. Were not his victim my mother, there does not exist a man whose good opinion I should so eagerly seek and highly prize as that of Rupert Falkner. It is that fatal name which forms the barrier between me and charity, shutting me out, at the same time, from hope and love. Thus incoherently, I put down my thoughts as they rise, a tangled maze which I ask you to unravel. I will endeavor to abide by your decision, whatever it may be, yet I again ask you to pause. Is Elizabeth's happiness as deeply implicated as mine? If it be, can I abide by any sentence that shall condemn her to a wretchedness similar to that which has so long been an inmate of my struggling heart? No, sooner than inflict one pang on her, I will fly from the world. We three will seek some far obscure retreat and be happy, despite the world's censure and even your condemnation. Falkner's heart swelled within him as he read. He could not but admire Neville's candor, and he was touched by the feelings he expressed towards himself, but pride was stronger than regret, and prompted an instant and decisive reply. He rebelled against the idea that Gerard and Elizabeth should suffer through him, and thus he wrote. You have appealed to Mrs. Raby. Will you suffer me to answer that appeal and to decide? I have a better right, for kind as she is, I have Elizabeth's welfare yet more warmly at heart. The affection that she feels for you will endure to the end of her life, for her faithful heart is incapable of change. On you therefore depends her happiness, and you are called upon to make some sacrifice to ensure it. Come here, take her at my hand, it is all I ask. From that hour you shall never see me more. The injured and the injurer will separate. My fortunes are of my own earning, and I can bear them. You must compensate to my dear child for my loss. You must be father as well as husband, and speak kindly of me to her, or her heart will break. We must be secret in our proceedings. Mystery and deception are contrary to my nature, but I willingly adopt them for her sake. Mrs. Raby must not be trusted, but you and I love Elizabeth sufficiently even to sacrifice a portion of our integrity to secure her happiness. For her own sake, we must blindfold her. She need never learn that we deceived her. She will naturally be separated from me for a short time. The period will be indefinitely prolonged, till new duties arise wholly to wean her from me, and I shall be forgotten. Come then at once, endure the sight of the guilty Falkner for a few short days, till you thus earn his dearest treasure, and do not fear that I shall intrude one moment longer than is absolutely necessary for our success. Be assured that when once Elizabeth is irrevocably yours, wide seas shall roll between us, nor will your condescension to my wish bring any stigma on yourself or your bride, for Miss Raby does not bear my tainted name. All I ask is that you will not delay. It is difficult for me to cloak my feelings to one so dear. Let my task of deception be abridged as much as possible. I shall give my Elizabeth to you with confidence and pleasure. You deserve her. Your generous disposition will enable you to endure her affection for me and even her grief at my departure. Never speak unkindly of me to her. When you see me no more, you will find less difficulty in forgetting the injury I have done you. You must endeavor to remember only the benefit you receive in gaining Elizabeth. Chapter 52. The beautiful month of May had arrived, with her light budding foliage, which seems to hang over the hoar branches of the trees like a green aerial mist. The nightingales sung through the moonlight night, and every other feathered chorister took up the note at early dawn. The sweetest flowers in the year embroidered the fields, and the verdant cornfields were spread like a lake, now glittering in the sun, now covered over by the shadows of the clouds. It appeared impossible not to hope, not to enjoy, yet a seriousness had again gathered over Falkner's countenance that denoted the return of care. He avoided the society even of Elizabeth. His rides were solitary, his evenings passed in the seclusion of his own room. Elizabeth, for the first time in her life, grew a little discontented. I sacrificed all to him, she thought, yet I cannot make him happy. Love alone possesses the scepter and arbitrary power to rule. Every other affection admits a parliament of thoughts, and debate and divisions ensue, which may make us wiser, but which sadly derogates from the throned state of what we fancy a master's sentiment. I cannot make Falkner happy, yet Neville is miserable through my endeavors, and to such struggle there is no end. My promised faith is inviolable, nor do I even wish to break it. One balmy, lovely day, Elizabeth rode out with her cousins. Mrs. Raby was driving her father-in-law through the grounds in the pony phaeton. Falkner had been out and was returned. Several days had passed, and no answer arrived from Neville. He was uneasy and sad, and yet rejoiced at the respite afforded to the final parting with his child. Suddenly, from the glass doors of the saloon, he perceived a gentleman riding up the avenue. He recognized him and exclaimed, "All is over." At that moment, he felt himself transported to a distant land, surrounded by strangers, cut off from all he held dear. Such must be the consequence of the arrival of Gerard Neville, and it was he who, dismounting, in a few minutes after entered the room. He came up to Falkner and held out his hand, saying, "We must be friends, Mr. Falkner. From this moment I trust that we are friends. We join together for the happiness of the dearest and most perfect being in the world." Falkner could not take his hand. His manner grew cold, but he readily replied, "I hope we do, and we must concert together to ensure our success." "Yet there is one other," continued Neville, "whom we must take into our consultations. Mrs. Raby." "No, Elizabeth herself. She alone can decide for us all and teach us the right path to take. Do not mistake me. I know the road she will point out and am ready to follow it. Do you think I could deceive her? Could I ask her to give me her dear self, and thus generously raise me to the very height of human happiness, with deception on my lips? I were indeed unworthy of her if I were capable of such an act. Yet, but for the sake of honest truth, I would not even consult her. My own mind is made up if you consent. I am come to you, Mr. Falkner, as a suppliant, to ask you to give me your adopted child, but not to separate you from her. I should detest myself if I were the cause of so much sorrow to either. If my conduct need explanation in the world, you are my excuse. I need go no further. We must both join in rendering Miss Raby happy, and both, I trust, remain friends to the end of our lives." "You are generous," replied Falkner. "Perhaps you are just. I am not unworthy of the friendship you offer, were you any other than you are. It is because I am such as I am that I venture to make advances which would be impertinent from any other." At this moment, a light step was heard on the lawn without, and Elizabeth stood before them. She paused in utter wonder on seeing Falkner and Neville together. Soon surprise was replaced by undisguised delight. Her expressive countenance became radiant with happiness. Falkner addressed her. "I present a friend to you, dear Elizabeth. I leave you with him. He will best explain his purposes and wishes. Meanwhile, I must remark that I consider him bound by nothing that has been said. You must take counsel together. You must act for your mutual happiness. That is all the condition I make. I yield to no other. Be happy. and if it be necessary, forget me, as I am very willing to forget myself." Falkner left them, and they instinctively, so to prevent interruption, took their way into a woody glade of the park. And as they walked beneath the shadows of some beautiful lime trees on the crisp green turf, disclosed to each other every inner thought and feeling. Neville declared his resolve not to separate her from her benefactor. "If the world censure me," he said, "I am content. I am accustomed to its judgments, and never found them sway or annoy me. I do right for my own heart. It is a godlike task to reward the penitent. In religion and morality, I know that I am justified. Whether I am in the code of worldly honor, I leave others to decide, and yet I believe that I am. I had once thought to have met Falkner in a duel, but my father's vengeance prevented that. He is now acquitted before all the world of being more than the accidental cause of my dear mother's death. Knights of old, after they fought in right good earnest, became friends, each finding, in the bravery of the other, a cause for esteem. Such is the situation of Rupert Falkner and myself, and we will both join, dear Elizabeth, in making him forget the past and rendering his future years calm and happy." Elizabeth could only look her gratitude. She felt, as was most true, that this was not a cause for words or reason. Falkner in himself offered, or did not offer, full excuse for the generosity of Neville. No one could see him, and not allow that the affectionate, duteous son in no way derogated from his reverence for his mother's memory, by entirely forgiving him who honored her as an earthly angel, and had deplored, through years of unutterable anguish, the mortal injury done her. Satisfied in his own mind that he acted rightly, Neville did not seek for any other approval, and yet he gladly accepted it from Elizabeth, whose heart, touched to its very core by his nobleness, felt an almost painful weight of gratitude and love. She tried to express it. Fortunately, between lovers mere language is not necessary ineffectually to utter that which transcends all expression. Neville felt himself most sweetly thanked. A more happy pair never trod this lovely earth than the two that, closely linked hand in hand, and with hearts open and true as the sunlight about them, enjoyed the sweetest hour of love, the first of acknowledged perpetual union, beneath the majestic, deep-shadowing thickets of Bella Forest. All that had seemed so difficult now took its course easily. They did not any of them seek to account for or to justify the course they took. They each knew that they could not do other than they did. Elizabeth could not break faith with Falkner. Neville could not renounce her. It might be strange, but it must be so. They three must remain together through life, despite all of tragic and miserable that seemed to separate them. Even Lady Cecil admitted that there was no choice. Elizabeth must be won. She was too dear a treasure to be voluntarily renounced. In a few weeks, the wedding day of Sir Gerard Neville and Miss Raby being fixed, she joined them at Bella Forest, and saw, with genuine pleasure, the happiness of the two persons whom she esteemed and loved most in the world secured. Mrs. Raby's warm heart reaped its own reward in witnessing this felicitous conclusion of her interference. Whether the reader of this eventful tale will coincide with every other person, fully in the confidence of all, in the opinion that such was the necessary termination of a position full of difficulty, is hard to say, but so it was, and it is most certain that no woman who ever saw Rupert Falkner but thought Neville just and judicious. And if any man disputed this point, when he saw Elizabeth, he was an immediate convert. As much happiness as anyone can enjoy, whose inner mind bears the unhealing wound of a culpable act, fell to the portion of Falkner. He had repented, and was forgiven, we may believe, in heaven as well as on earth. He could not forgive himself, and this one shadow remained upon his lot. It could not be got rid of. Yet perhaps in the gratitude he felt to those about him, in the softened tenderness inspired by the sense that he was dealt with more leniently than he believed that he deserved, he found full compensation for the memories that made him feel himself a perpetual mourner beside Alytha's grave. Neville and Elizabeth had no drawback to their felicity. They cared not for the world, and when they did enter it, the merits of both commanded respect and liking. They were happy in each other, happy in a growing family, happy in Falkner, whom, as Neville had said, it was impossible to regard with lukewarm sentiments, and they derived a large store of happiness from his enlightened mind, from the elevated tone of moral feeling, which was the result of his sufferings, and from the deep affection with which he regarded them both. They were happy also in the wealth which gave scope to the benevolence of their dispositions, and in the talents that guided them rightly through the devious maze of life. They often visited Dramore, but their chief time was spent at their seat in Bucks, near which Falkner had purchased a villa. He lived in retirement. He grew a sage amid his books and his own reflections. But his heart was true to itself to the end, and his pleasures were derived from the society of his beloved Elizabeth of Neville, who was scarcely less dear, and their beautiful children. Surrounded by these, he felt no want of the nearest ties. They were to him as his own. Time passed lightly on, bringing no apparent change. Thus they still live, and Neville has never for a moment repented the irresistible impulse that led him to become the friend of him whose act had rendered his childhood miserable, but who completed the happiness of his maturer years. The End.